Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking Leadership. Thanks for joining me on the podcast once again to talk all things leadership. We are well over 50 podcast episodes, and I've talked to a range of leaders across a range of industries, and today is no different. My guest today previously working for AECOM in a leadership role. She is a part-time yoga teacher and is currently working in a full-time position as the Industry Liaison Officer for Shailer State High School. And I'd like to welcome to the podcast Annette Demosthenous. How are you, Annette?
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I hope I got the pronunciation of the surname correct.
You sure did. Yes, you did.
Thank you. Okay, so part of the my madness here in reaching out to you, Annette, is I'm looking for leaders in all walks of life. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about. So let's get into the podcast. So I'll start where I always start with these questions is, in which industry was your first leadership role and why did you take that on, Annette?
I guess if I look right back and talking from like a formal leadership role, it would be with the AECOM, which is an engineering firm. And that was a team leader type role with a whole bunch of other gals who were executive assistants, and we got together and it was about trying to create a vision and a purpose for what we delivered and getting that team and getting the best out of them and moving them forward.
And so was that role something that you went for formally? Did you get tapped on the shoulder to do it? What was the genesis of getting into that role, mate?
Yeah, I got tapped on the shoulder for it and was asked if I'd step up and go for that role, and I said yes. And it's interesting, when I sort of was thinking about this first leadership role, I had to kind of look back because I've had various roles in other different companies as well where I've taken on lead type roles, but in some cases they've been more of, projects had to be done and getting that project finished. So I guess I looked at this role as in it had a lot more people, and having people report through and looking at their roles from the company point of view, as I said, moving forward, and what their service looked like.
Sure. No, thank you for sharing that. Look, the next question's around what I'm calling the distinction between leadership and management. So in your travels, and I guess you can use the role you just discussed or other roles that you've had in different organizations, do you see a difference between the leadership and management function?
Yes, I do. That's exactly the dilemma that I had when I was thinking the first leadership role, because there's been lots of different industries that I've worked in: finance, construction, superannuation, primary industries, and then into, the engineering and finally education. And in all of those different industries that I've worked in, there's been many types of roles that have involved like a project or something that we had to finish. So it was doing something and finishing a task, which involved quite a lot of management skills. And then the leadership skills, I think, came into where you had to create the vision and get everybody on board and, getting them towards the end goal. I see those kind of differences in those skill sets, but I think you do have to have both. I think you need to understand management and have some management skills in order to lead. But I don't think all managers necessarily make good leaders, because I think management in some cases can be the doing, the operational aspects of something. I think the leadership aspects, again, they come back to that purpose, that vision of why we're trying to do what we're doing, and engaging people and getting people's buy-in on, this is where we're going. So having that strategic thought, or we're going this direction, and, come along for the ride. This is the bus that we're going, and this is the journey we're going along.
Leaders sometimes make mistakes, obviously, we're all human. When a mistake or an issue has been attributed to your leadership, how have you dealt with that, Annette?
I guess the first thing is you always fess up straight away. You take responsibility, own it straight away. And I think the quicker you do that, the better it is for everyone. And in taking ownership or in taking responsibility for it, gathering feedback from those that also may be involved in the situation or the circumstance, and doing some reflection. I think using using that so-called mistake or that speed bump that it might be as a time to reflect on, well, what were we doing? What were we doing that was working? What were we doing that wasn't working? And what could we have done differently? And, having that voice of others rather than just your own perspective, that's the real powerful moment when you can talk to others and collaborate with others and get their input. And you may actually find something that is much greater than what you initially thought you were going to do, or you may find yourself on a different track.
What do you think is the most difficult part about being a leader in your travels, mate?
Wow, that's a really good question.
I hope you have a really good answer.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. So I think in the difficulties is, I wouldn't call it lonely as such as sometimes you just, even separate is maybe too big of a word, but there's sometimes a gap of where your headspace might be and where you can solidly see that vision and the direction of where you want to go, and you just know your team isn't ready to step up in that space yet, and that can sometimes feel maybe a little bit isolating in at times. So, and I remember a quote from a really great leader that I witnessed during some of my travels was that eagles don't flock, and I often think of that's a really good analogy sometimes for those moments when you just go, we're going this way, and I'm just kind of feeling a bit isolated. But then that's where I guess your toolbox of strategies that you use to go, okay, well, get out there, how can I engage, how can I influence, how do I get the buy-in from the team or the stakeholders that you're dealing with.
What's your measure of success as a leader?
Wow, I do have to really think about that, because when I think of success from a leadership perspective, I think of it from the success of those that I'm involved in, not so much as myself, but it's what's the outcome. So from my current role working with students and on other committees, etc., it's the success of the students, or it's the success of the committee and what we're trying to achieve, and the individuals that are involved in those projects, or the students, or etc. So the outcomes that come through. But from a people perspective, that might not be something tangible, because everybody's version of success is different. It means something different to everybody.
In the learning environment that you're working in, that do you find that success for other leaders that you've dealt with, and you don't have to name those people obviously, is the development of the student and the progression of the school community the real measures of success for you as an educator?
Yes, from where I'm sitting and the role and the people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, it's all about the students and the community and where we're heading. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's I go to work every day, is because that is the underlying purpose or vision. Is it's not just one thing about getting so many students into this or that. It's what's good for our students, and then that can be taken down to an individual basis. So I think that as a whole, definitely. Can I just say something in that respect? So definitely from that education space, yes, in those outcomes or the benefits to the community and the students as a whole, but coming from the experience I've had from industry or large organisations, again, it's that the purpose and their vision and being able to really say, and this is just my personal point of view, but being able to say is, hey, we made a difference. Something that we did made a difference or had an impact on our world or on our community. And it may have been local, it may have been global, it may have been national, but it's had an impact. I think for me in particular, that's a huge driver, and I place a lot of value on that.
Let me throw a couple of statements at you. So really keen to find out what your thoughts are on these. On the job experience develops better leaders.
I think it's definitely a contributor. I wouldn't say it's the whole package, but it definitely is a contributor. If you don't have any exposure to being on the job, then you may be coming from a theoretical point of view without having any interaction on a of a practical nature and human interaction, and it could almost, if it was just purely that theoretical, almost put a wall up between what actually happens and what you think happens. So I think it's absolutely necessary. Is it the sole contributing factor? No, because I think you have lots of different elements that contribute. So you have, being curious and wanting to learn more, and wanting to grow, and self-acknowledgement, as well as learning your technical on-the-job skills.
Sure, and you've kind of covered the next one, so hopefully this will complete the circle a little bit. Formal education helps to develop better leaders.
I think, yes, a similar comment. I think that it contributes. And I know from my perspective that my formal education really has only commenced in the last 5 years or so. I have had a lot of on-the-job experience, which has led to, being given opportunity. So again, was a contributing factor. But having, I think I'm curious about what we can do and how we might do something differently, and where we could possibly go, having that looking forward, and using formal education to target a specific skill set, I think it helps. So, and understanding self and realising, I might have a gap here, that's something that I need to go and learn about. I can go and do that. And that's been the journey that I've done. I didn't go straight to uni, I went straight to work. So working on the job, and then plugging in different elements of coursework, or conferences or seminars or formalised learning when it was needed. That was my journey. If I'd gone the formal education first, it may have been a different story. I don't know. I can only speak from the journey that I've had.
Sure. I always find that interesting, that people that come back to education of whatever kind, formal or otherwise, that they often talk of I was grounded in my on-the-job experience, and then I used education later as one of the many tool sets that I need to engage in the world of work. And if I had to do it again, I was the opposite. So I left high school, went straight to uni, and then looked for work after a formal process of studying. And one thing that I regret that I had back then is that I didn't do more volunteering work, or more work to get kind of to understand the world of work a little bit better. So when I first started my work journey, it was for the federal government. This is going back when John Howard was in power. So it demonstrates just how old I really am. So way back then, I took a role with the federal government, and my first manager, again, for the sake of privacy, I won't mention her name, but she said to me, what's the most important? Who are the most important people on the floor that you're on in your team? And I didn't have an answer for her, because I was new to this kind of position. And she said, it's treat everyone, in particular your admin team that are there to help you manage your day and manage the flow of work here. If you can treat everyone with respect, you'll go a long way in making your day a lot easier for yourself. And that always resonated in my head, that you treat everyone like you want to be treated, and you'll have a good work outcome, whatever that is. And it gives you a chance to shine in front of people, whoever they are, and to see you for the person that you are, as much as you are prepared to make that available, so that you're not seeing as this robotic android that comes from a university setting that has no idea of what the world of work is. Because I have to admit, when I first started my job, I thought, well, I've been to uni, so I know something of the world. You really don't until you actually get into a job, and you've taken a few kicks, and you see what being accountable for the work that you do means. Really don't have a sense of what the world of work is. And that doesn't sound like it's a groundbreaking truth that I've just revealed, but really there are some people that will leave formal education thinking they've got it stitched up, and they really don't. So I'm always interested to find people that have done it the other way around, because I think into my older older age, I guess, if you want to call it that, as I've done high level studies based on workplace experience, it's made it more real for me because I can relate it to the work that I've done. Had I done this level of study when I was a lot younger, it wouldn't have the implications of what that means for you in the workplace and as an older, more established leader, if I can use that terminology, that you'll miss some of those learnings because you haven't had the life experience. And I never thought I'd be an advocate of that, but I think the more life experience you have in multiple roles, the better you become as a team player, let alone as a leader. Does it resonate?
Yeah, that
with
resonates.
you?
Yeah, it does. And I think that life experience is a really good set of words because that encompasses a whole range of different roles. And I know from a career development space, which is some of the space that I work in now, that, you know, this concept of it is now lifelong learning. It is not just go and do your uni degree and you're done. It is with the rate of change that we're going through and the types of careers that are coming, some that we don't even know about yet. It's this this openness to know that you're going to have to continue your learning to continue to be employed or to continue to be in business. And that learning you will tailor to specific areas that you've got gaps in, or that you find that, you know, you need to find a technical skill, so you need to do some learning in it. I think that's going to be, you know, the way of the future, is that we're going to see a lot more tailor-made for individuals type learning. And I know certainly that's what I'm doing myself.
Last statement, and I'm really keen to get your views on this, Annette. Leaders are born, not made.
Ooh, no, I wouldn't agree with that at all.
That's okay. Please tell me why.
Oh, look, I've reacted quite strongly to that, haven't I?
That's okay.
Clarify, I think that you could be born with some inherent traits that could predisposition you, I guess, to becoming a leader. But I also think that, you know, as we've talked about, life experience and mentors and being offered opportunities and self-knowledge and learning on the job, all of those things take the clay and mold the leader. You know, so I think you might have some inherent traits, but I do think that you can make a leader. Identifying those who exhibit natural tendencies, yeah, sure, but it doesn't always guarantee that they're going to become, you know, the best leader. We've had some in our history that have been very charismatic people, but I wouldn't call them great leaders, you know, with some of the things that they've done. So, not mentioning any names, but
for those listening, I'm having a quiet chuckle to myself. It's good to see that there was a reaction to that particular statement. I personally, I'm somewhere in the middle on that, because I guess in different people's travels, I've seen some people that I think are naturally born good leaders, and some that have made themselves through hard work and through opportunity become good leaders. So, but yeah, it's interesting, and I guess one of the curiosities that I have as an early career researcher is that almost visceral reaction to that statement that you gave, which is fine, because if you don't agree with the statement, that's great. What is it about that being born into that really sets people off? That no, you don't. You can be created into a leader, and that really gets to the nub of the nature versus nurture type argument with leadership. Is it something that can be developed over time? So what I would ask you to maybe think about, and you can challenge me on this, please, because this is a interesting debate in of itself, is people like your Steve Jobs of the world and your Richard Bransons, the entrepreneurial types, and you could mention any number of people in the leadership space, not just from a for-profit perspective. So I'm just trying to think out loud here. Some other leaders in that you see in the public space. People can shine in different roles, and you think, you know, that these people are so charismatic that maybe they just were born to do this. Where, if you looked at those people's backgrounds, they probably had some opportunities and took some risks that no one else did, that gave them more opportunities to be even better at what they did. So whether they were born with those traits or whether they, like some people have said to me, you take advantage of the things that come your way, and if you can run with them, they'll make you a better individual, let alone a better leader.
It'd be interesting, I think, to look at the journey of some of those people that you've talked about, and even looked at their environment and the people that surrounded them, their parents and their families, and what the conversation or the rhetoric was around them, and what they grew up. Because some people will come through a really inspiring and supportive environment and become those natural leaders, and others may come through horrendous circumstances and use that as a motivator, as a driver to go, I've got to be better and I've got to get out of that.
Yeah,
so,
I knew you'd throw that one at me, and I agree. I fully agree with that negative circumstances in your life can make you stand up and be better.
Can be a big motivator. Yeah. Definitely.
And you find that in people in crisis situations. So the one that always sticks in my mind from a Queensland perspective, for those listening, that's the state in which I'm broadcasting recording the podcast at the moment, is when we've had natural disasters, you see our leaders really do step up and just get the job done to help people during time of crises. And we're seeing that now with this response to the coronavirus. So again, for those listening, we're in the middle of that, I guess, in the start of what the media has dubbed, the World Health Organization has dubbed a pandemic, that we're seeing people come to the fore when it comes to leadership, and particularly around how you deal with thinking about a crisis situation. And what's happening now is a textbook example of what good and bad leadership will look like. And it's not, again, for me, it's not hurling insult at those that may get part of that process wrong, because in a crisis situation, you respond as best you can, and then hopefully in hindsight, it was the best thing to have done. But I really, I don't hold the view that once the crisis is over, that you go back and you start tearing apart those that didn't make the right call at the right time. Because for me, it would be, well, would you have made a better call in their stead had you been the one with the ultimate responsibility to make that call? So I think it's difficult to throw rocks at someone in a crisis situation when they're trying to get the best outcome that they can for community. And so, sorry to digress. Look, I'll get back onto the podcast questions, but again, for those listening, I was really quite interested with your response to the leaders are born, not made question. And in my mind, I was about to drop that as one of the questions for the podcast, but I'm going to keep it because I do want to test out, hopefully when I've got a couple of hundred of these done, just where some of the thinking is around that, because I think it has some capacity to shape future generations of leaders. Like, are we going to look for talent? Are we going to nurture talent more? Are we going to wait for that next big thinker to come along? Or what's the best way to identify these people? Because that particular statement goes to this issue of how do you spot talent and potential leaders? Are they the captain of the football squad, or are they the quiet person that just give them a chance and suddenly they're going to be the best leader? Like, how do you spot them if the philosophy is they're not born, so we've got to create them, we've got to make them somehow?
See, when you put it that way, I think it would depend on who you are and what you're talking about, what kind of leader you're trying to identify.
Sure.
So, if that was me and I had a team and I was looking for potential leaders, because I think part of leadership is always having some kind of succession plan and understanding how you're going to replace yourself. So you want to be trying to identify who in your team may have those qualities. So they may be those innate qualities that they were born with. So
I've made you backtrack, mate. I've made you backtrack.
So that's really, really interesting.
All right, mate. So almost done. As part of this is the part of the podcast where I ask my guests questions around two what I would think are core leadership capabilities, and I'm looking at them as part of my studies. And I'm going to ask the following to get your critique of those. It's more, what's your perspective on those as leader capabilities? So, strategic thinking and foresight in the studies that I'm doing, I think are some of the most critical leader capabilities. What would be your perspective on those, Annette?
Yeah, I do agree with that. The strategic thinking, again, it goes back to those key words of like vision and purpose, and where you're heading, and that ability to think maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the track, which then brings in that whole foresight element as well, and trying to find out from some of the best brains in the country about futurist thinking and where we might be going, and even tapping into some of those young bright brains that are at uni and are doing some cutting edge stuff, and looking at where they may think that we're going. I think those two elements are definitely a huge part of leadership, definitely. Along with that is that I guess it comes back to that openness, being willing to learn, being curious. All of those things kind of are wrapped up in those two areas too.
I'm not suggesting for a moment that they're the only critical leadership capabilities, but I think at least in the literature that I'm reading, and hopefully at some point I'll be able to share the thesis that I'm working on, is that at the very least, if you don't have a decent skill set around a thing called strategic thinking, that you're not going to be as effective a leader as you could be. So I'm not saying if you don't have it, you can't be a leader, but I would suggest to you that some of the, what would you call them, some of the most interesting and articulate and really quite out there leaders that we've got in every different walk of life, if you had that discussion around strategic thinking, they're all going to have a perspective on it, and they all probably bring to the table, look, we look at the bigger picture, but we also look at how that fits into the micro picture, and how that fits into possible different futures. And it's one of the podcasts that I'd like to refer people to that hasn't been published yet, but will be, is a discussion that I had with my current supervisor, who articulates what the importance of strategic thinking and foresight as part of the leadership makeup of people. Again, not the only capabilities, but the critical nature of this is that we all have the capacity to think strategically, and we all have the capacity to use foresight, because they're both innate cognitive abilities that we've got. We can't escape having them, and it's for me, it's a degree to which those things are harnessed in people that will make the difference between a truly effective leader and maybe not so effective leader. But again, the debate is out there, and one of the ones that came up that threw me a little bit, but I think I'm more married to this, and had I had my time again, maybe I would have looked at this in my study, but I've only got a certain amount of time to do it, and I don't want to be spending 10 years trying to get one paper out, is, at least on a part-time basis, is this thing about being a good communicator, that you can be as strategic as you like and have great visions for the future, but if you can't articulate that to those that you're leading, then it really goes nowhere.
That's right.
And I think you've made, you particularly at the start of the podcast, you were quite adamant that it's the lead that we have to be thinking about. And this is one of those nuances around leadership, that it's not just about the individual leader, because you're leading a group of people, otherwise you're not a leader. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, absolutely. It's that being able to communicate the vision, being able to communicate the direction, and having that influence, getting people on board with your vision, because it's the team that carries it out. It's not just the one. So
yeah, correct. You don't have a team of one. That's exactly right.
No, that's it.
So Annette, look, I do appreciate your time today, and here is the final question. What would you say to a younger version of yourself about being an effective leader?
Oh, a younger version of myself. I think actually you raised this early on in our chat. I would say to myself to reach out to others more, to reach out to peers, but also to reach higher and talk to people that maybe that I aspire to, and not to be frightened to do that, or feeling, you know, a lack of confidence. So having that confidence to you know, go and see someone that's already done what you're thinking about and asking them about it. Because what I've learnt over the years is that people actually really like to talk about themselves. So go and ask them, how did you do it? What could I learn? You know, and you'd be surprised at just how much they are willing to share. So I think if had my time over again, I would say that, and to maybe slow it down just a little. Maybe just slow it down a little bit. That's probably the two things.
That's fantastic, and that the first part of that response is why I do these podcasts, and it's taken me a while to get to a level of comfort with the questions that I've been able to put together, and that you crazy people that I've been interviewing have allowed me to refine over the time. Is that you only get one shot at having a good career, and I think part of that is being able to look at yourself and maybe be able to have a bit of a laugh and think about what it is that you're doing. And I definitely have learned something from every one of the podcasts. And for those listening, I'll be talking to Annette here. And look, I do appreciate your time, Annette. I know how busy you are, and with what's happening with the coronavirus, you guys as educators have gone a very interesting pathway ahead. Let's call it that. That on a day-to-day basis, we really don't know where this is going. So I appreciate your time. Thank you. And it's justified in my mind why I reach out to people that I know in my own travels of wanting to do these interviews. So I do thank you for your time, mate. It's much appreciated.
Oh, you're welcome, mate. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for joining me. This is Eric Perez, your podcast host. I'll catch you all on the next podcast.